begin each story, I will recite a spell in Mandarin to protect you. 观自在菩萨行深般若波罗蜜多时，照见五蕴皆空，度一切苦厄。舍利子，色不异空，空不异色，色即是空，空即是色，受想行识，亦复如是。舍利子是诸法空相，不生不灭，不垢不净，不增不减，是故空中无色，受想行识，眼耳鼻舌身意，无色声香味触法，无眼界，乃至无眼世界，无明亦无明尽，乃至无老死亦无老死尽，无苦集灭道，无智亦无得，亦无所得故。菩提萨埵，依般若波罗蜜多故，心无挂碍，无挂碍故，无有恐怖，远离颠倒梦想，究竟涅槃。三世诸佛依般若波罗蜜多故，得阿耨多罗三藐三菩提。故知般若波罗蜜多是大神咒，是大明咒，是无上咒，是无等等咒，能除一切苦，真实不虚。故说般若波罗蜜多咒，即说咒曰：揭谛揭谛，波罗揭谛，波罗僧揭谛，菩提萨婆诃。Devil's fetus. May clenched her fists, lying painfully on the operating table, her sweat soaking the white sheets beneath her, while a doctor was busy scraping a child out of her body. Outside the window, the sky was overcast, seemingly on the brink of a downpour. Bright red blood dripped onto the doctor's white gloves, and the clear water beside him also turned red. The infant's head was forcefully pulled from May's abdomen. The unborn infant's head was bloodied and mangled, with tissues intermingled haphazardly. The eyeballs appeared as though they might fall out any moment, and only half of the brain was intact. Looking as if the head had been split open like a sliced apple, suddenly a thunderclap boomed in the sky, the sound deafening, and then the lights in the operating room went out. A flash of lightning tore across the sky, and at that moment, May vaguely saw a tiny infant crouching on her and crying. She shuddered and fainted. May is a single woman with an ordinary appearance and no stable job, recently heartbroken from a breakup. She often drowns her sorrows in bars. On the day she met him, May was heavily intoxicated, remembering nothing but his unsettling smile. When she awoke, May found herself in an unknown dark place, experiencing a slight pain in her lower body. Soon she discovered she was pregnant, yet she had no idea who the father of the child was, making it even harder for her to manage alone. June, the small town in western China, was scorching hot, particularly for May, who had just suffered a miscarriage. She disembarked from a bus, trembling and barely able to stand. As she walked down the street, May suddenly saw a pale-faced baby, squatting on the ground, blood covering its eyes and face, its mouth slightly open, leaking blood, gazing hauntingly at May. A chill ran down her spine, and in panic, she closed her eyes and stumbled back, bumping into someone behind her. The person screamed, "Hey, what are you doing?" Turning around, May realized she had bumped into a heavy-set woman. I'm so sorry," May stammered, stepping back. Just then, a loud crash rang out, followed by screams. The heavy-set woman in front of her disappeared. Horrified, May saw a large truck's tire pressing down on a person, the same woman she had bumped into, now bloodied beneath the weight. As night fell, still jobless, May dragged her tired body home. Her home was located in the old town area near a mine. As she neared her house and quickened her pace, she suddenly heard a creepy, crying voice from behind, calling, "Mommy, Mommy." Shocked, May turned around to scream and fell to the ground. There lay a half-formed baby, like a pile of rotting flesh, extending one decayed hand with exposed white bone, and crying out, "Mommy, Mommy," followed by sobbing noises. Terrified, May covered her eyes and backed up until she hit a wall. As the crying stopped, she shakily uncovered her eyes, but the child was nowhere to be seen. Standing on the path, May's face twitched nervously, wondering whether what she saw was a hallucination or a ghostly encounter. Her heart raced with chilling terror, and she felt as if she had seen her own child. Determinedly, May walked home. That night, too afraid to turn off the lights yet. Exhausted, she soon fell asleep and had a strange dream. In May's dream, she found herself standing alone amidst a heap of garbage behind a hospital. Dogs barking pierced the silence, and she saw 3 or 4 dogs tearing at a piece of flesh drenched in blood. Out of curiosity, May moved closer and, to her horror, realized that the hunk of flesh was a baby. The baby's eyes met hers, crying out, "Mommy, it hurts, Mommy." A sudden pang of pain struck her heart. In a flurry of protective instinct, May picked up a stick and fiercely drove the dogs away. The dogs' eyes glowed green as they turned from the baby and began to circle her instead. Clutching the stick tightly, May's heart raced as she struck one of the approaching dogs, eliciting a howl of pain. More green eyes appeared, slowly advancing towards her from around the dump. May felt fear mingling with dread. Just then, May noticed the piece of meat by her began to crackle and rise, prompting the glowing-eyed dogs to vanish without a trace. Once more, May heard a familiar voice, "Mommy, Mommy," coming from the baby's mouth as she turned and fled in terror. Running, she found herself at a cemetery where an elderly woman, her grandmother who had passed away years ago, greeted her. "May, you shouldn't have abandoned your child. Now he wants to take you with him, to be with you forever. Hurry to Minged Road in the mining district and seek Mrs. Wang, a good friend of mine from my living days. She will help you." Behind her, a chilling sob echoed. Turning to see the baby, its blood-stained form alarmingly close. The baby lunged for her arms just as May woke from the nightmare, soaked in sweat. She couldn't wait any longer and immediately headed for Minged Road on her bicycle, an area she once called home. The streetlights along the quiet road cast a red glow over the pavement, creating an eerie atmosphere. Arriving at Mrs. Wang's house, May found the door strangely ajar. Inside, Mrs. Wang sat under a dimly lit statue of Guanyin surrounded by candles and offerings, awaiting May, having received a premonitory dream from her grandmother. "May, you've arrived. I've been waiting for quite some time," said Mrs. Wang with her eyes closed. "How did you know I was coming?" "Your grandmother came to me in a dream, asking me to help you," Mrs. Wang sighed. "The moment your child was being aborted, lightning struck, encapsulating the child's resentment. Now the child wants to take you with him. Does that mean I must die?" May asked, terrified. "There is one more solution, which is to obliterate his soul," said Mrs. Wang while making a gesture. "What should I do?" asked May, puzzled. "It's such a tragedy," murmured Mrs. Wang. "If it hadn't been for your grandmother insisting that I save you, I would never have agreed to help." Mrs. Wang pointed at a peachwood sword hanging on the wall. "This sword has been soaked in Black Dog's blood for 49 days. Remember, when the devil's fetus approaches, you must plunge this sword unexpectedly into his heart. Then he will turn into a pool of blood and disappear forever." May slung her sword behind her back, thanked Ms. Wang and said goodbye. She is speeding down the road on his bicycle, when suddenly she crashed into something and fell over with her bicycle. When she got up, she saw the baby. His appearance was no longer horrifying but normal, like any other infant. He crawled towards her, babbling, "Mama, hug." Confused, May opened her arms to embrace the child. "Ah!" May screamed as she struggled futilely, the baby giggling while his tiny hands tightly strangled her neck. May shut her eyes and slashed wildly with the peachwood sword until she felt nothing in front of her. When she opened her eyes, she saw the baby's hands had been cut off, lying inert on the ground. He looking pitifully at May with big eyes blinking, murmuring, "Mum Hoi." May felt an overwhelming urge to break down, questioning her actions as if she was killing her child herself, her tears blurring her vision. Approaching to embrace the baby, she suddenly heard Ms. Wang's voice. Quickly stab his heart, he's not your child anymore. He's a fierce ghost, do not be fooled by his appearance. May snapped back to reality, slowly walked over to the baby whose blood-drenched hands reached out for a hug and plunged the sword fiercely into the baby's heart. Instantly, the baby let out a bizarre cry and turned into a pile of dark purple blood. May sat motionless, staring at the bloody remains, tears streaming down her face. Suddenly, May woke up in her bed, puzzled by the bizarre nightmare, questioning how she was at home. May immediately prepares a gift to visit Mrs. Wang, but is surprised to find that the door is covered with dust and cobwebs and seems to have been unoccupied for years. She asked a passing villager about it, only to have him say with a strange look on his face, "Miss, she passed away 3 years ago."